Okay, good evening all. You're very welcome to what is the inaugural event of the Clarecastle Covid Response Network. And thank you all for joining us this evening on our webcam and also on the radio link. So I'd like to introduce first of all Paul Ellingstad, who is chairperson of the Clarecastle Covid Response Network, and he'll introduce that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary, and thanks everyone who's joining us tonight live on the webcast. We're delighted on behalf of all of the volunteers of the COVID Support Network here in Clarecastle to welcome some of our local talent, both musicians as well as James McMahon for the talk on dealing with well-being in these uncertain times. We look forward to hosting a number of sessions. This is the first one. So without further ado, I'll be turning it back over to Marie to introduce the Kilfenora musicians, and off we go. Thank you.
Great. So it's a cold evening out there this evening, but we have some fantastic musicians here from Kilfenora and wonderful local talent who are going to lift our spirits. I'm sure we'll be toe tapping and hands clapping and everything to warm us up this evening. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to our musicians. Mighty stuff. Big bull bus there for musicians, virtually and live here in-house. Thank you very much. And you won't get away that easy now. We'll have a few more tunes out of you before the night is over, and we might even get a half set together here, I'd say. Before without further ado, I'm going to introduce our next piece of the programme tonight. We have James McMahon, a local man who's with Clarecare, and James is going to talk to you tonight about our theme of well-being in uncertain times and a helping hand. Okay, so thank you, James.
So good evening everyone, and welcome to the first in a series of presentations organised by the Clarecastle Community Response Network. The Clarecastle Community Network response was set up in April following the lockdown due to COVID-19. The network represents the different voluntary groups and organisations and has focused on being the contact network to respond to the new needs created when people suddenly had to change their daily routines and their habits and behaviour due to cocooning or due to having to isolate. The network organised collecting and delivering shopping, meals or medications, as well as providing updates on the regulations that the pandemic brought through the different stages. The title of the series, Wellbeing in Uncertain Times, is very apt, as life as we knew it changed in March. From never having heard of COVID-19, it has gone on to dominate our lives in 2020, and it continues. It dominates news, conversations, and has disrupted and changed all our lives in some way. COVID-19 virus has impacted on everyone's life, whether we realise it or not, and whether we like it or not. November is the month we remember people who have died. The last time I was in this church was for John Lynch's son's funeral, John Jr., and the last time I heard the Kilfenora music was on that occasion as well. I would like to remember John Jr. this evening, and would also like to remember his Uncle Jerry, who sang at that funeral and who has also died since. I want to remember everyone from the parish who have died this year, and also the more than 2,000 people who have died from COVID-19 around the country. Let us take a few seconds to remember their lives and their families' loss. We are currently 4 weeks into the latest lockdown caused by the second wave of COVID-19, and there are signs already that we are getting weary, disheartened, and fraying at the edges, and thinking things are as bad as ever and might even be worse at Christmas or January. And the danger with that thinking is that it can lead us very quickly to being uncaring of each other and thinking it's not worth the effort at the time that it's needed most. So it is an opportune time to have this Helping Hand series. We had hoped COVID-19 was under control as the restrictions were lifted in June and July and August. Even though most people were very careful, it has not prevented other outbreaks, and this has led to the latest lockdown that we are currently in. The Helping Hand that is part of the title of the series, Wellbeing in Uncertain Times, a Helping Hand. The Helping Hand, I believe, is mainly our own strengths. And what I have to say is based on the National Framework for Living with COVID-19 and the HSE Minding Your Wellbeing programme. My presentation will focus on how and why we can care for ourselves and for others, how we can cope with stress and anxiety, and our ability to adapt and stay in control at certain times, in these uncertain times. If you happen to have a pen and paper handy, I will ask you maybe to make a note of a few things as I go along. What I present here this evening will only make a difference if you, the viewer on the webcam, or the listener on the radio, will hear one or two things that you can apply to yourself. I will look at 5 areas that contribute to self-care and well-being, and they are familiar to everyone already. They are the areas identified in the National Framework to help us manage the risk of COVID-19 and to focus on personal well-being and resilience and caring for ourselves and for others. And the 5 areas that contribute mainly, the 5 main areas that contribute to our self-care and well-being and our mental health are: number 1, keeping active; number 2, keeping in contact; number 3, hobbies and activities; number 4, eating well; and number 5, minding our mood and our stress levels. Self-care is these activities and practices that we choose to do every day to support our health and well-being. If we don't choose or plan these supports, very often they don't happen. And you can guarantee that many times in the past, before March, you will have heard yourself saying, "I haven't time for that now. I'm too busy." We often feel guilty about taking time for ourselves, and we put it off, saying we'll do it later. Maybe wait till I have time, wait till I have holidays. We can't have any holidays now anyway. But what we have found, one of the positive outcomes of COVID-19 has been finding time. And my question to you this evening, or my challenge to you this evening is, what are you using that time for? Are you using more of that time for self-care, for keeping active, for keeping in contact, for being creative, or for looking after your diet and eating well? Because self-care improves our health and our well-being. We feel better about ourselves and we improve our self-esteem, because when we feel good, we feel better about ourselves. And the benefits of self-care and feeling better are: you are better able to relax, you sleep better, and you cope better with everyday challenges. You are more resilient, and I will talk about resilience later. So keeping active is the first of the areas that contribute to our self-care. And activity of any kind is a huge boost to our well-being. During the first lockdown in April and May and June, many people were out walking, running, jogging and cycling. Because there was no hurling in the field, I found I had time to walk myself every evening. And I met so many people that I hadn't even met before out walking. I've never seen so many dogs being walked, and I've never met so many people on the bypass, on the Lees Road, down the quay, in Bellybeg Woods, or if I got as far as the beach. My main contact with my neighbours in Primrose Gardens was meeting them out walking and being able to say a quick hello. It was much better than saluting them from the car, but of course it's not as good as being able to call into the house for the cuppa or for the chat. Instead of meeting Decky up at the pitch, I was meeting him walking somewhere between here and Ennis. The recommended exercise guidelines indicate that we need at least 30 minutes of strenuous exercise 3 times a week, but ideally most days, to get the heart pumping and the muscles working and to help our digestion and breathing. I would be fairly confident that the overall health of the community has benefited from all this activity. And when the Camogie Club set a walking challenge in June, numerous pairs of runners, including my own, were worn out. I went from 10,000 steps a day to 25,000, and I still could not catch up with Mary Carney or Kitty Talty. Luckily, for all our players in Clarecastle GAA, we were able to get in 2 or 3 months hurling activity. And before I forget, I would like to send best wishes to Ken Ralph and Stephen O'Halloran and Tony Kelly as they take on Tig de Bourca and Waterford on Saturday. Be sure to get the flags out and tune in to the match. So the important thing in terms of activity is that we make time during the day if we can. And it's important now because there is so little daylight that we try and get out while there is some daylight. And I find myself that the only way I can do it sometimes is to walk to work in the mornings. And at least I have that period of time that I'm out in the daylight. As well as the benefits physically and mentally from exercise, there are extra benefits that you can get if you are mindful or tuned in while you are out and about. So how tuned are you? How tuned in are you when you're out walking? I meet lots of people who are on the phone listening to music. And I meet lots of people that are tuned in, and I meet lots of people that are tuned out. And one example, I was up Lees Road last Sunday, and while there were loads of people there, one couple caught my attention. A young couple, as they were passing me by, were socially distant, but had their phones in their hand just out in front of their faces. And I was wondering as they were strolling along what was going to get their hearts pumping. And to me, what were they missing? Because the woods were alive. There were so many colours to see and so many leaves on the ground and the smell of the wet leaves and the feel of the soft ground. And so these are things and benefits that you can get in addition to the physical exercise. And being in touch with nature and your surrounds is most helpful to ground you if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed at this time of the COVID-19 pandemic. If you can't go walking, and some people obviously would not be able to go walking, it might be important just to sit at the door or at an open window for a half an hour every day. And you might even get to say hello to someone passing. And there are loads of exercises and stretches that you can do. And one of the benefits of a mobile phone or having a laptop is that you can find a routine of exercise on YouTube or Facebook. And if you're on the phone or the computer all day, get up at least once an hour and stretch and walk around the house. And every 20 minutes, it's important to take a look away from the screen. So just if you look to your left and then go back and look to your right. And just for that 30 seconds to a minute, give your eyes and your brain a rest from the screen. The second area of importance in terms of self-care is relations and keeping in contact with people. Person-to-person connection is vital to our well-being. We are social beings, and our instinct is to reach out. It is painful not to be able to call into family and friends for a chat and a company and a cup of tea or the drink. Our relationships are the most important contributor to good self-care and well-being. Relationships connect us with others in work, through our families, through our friends, and a lot of our relationships are long-term relationships. These positive relationships offer us trust and honesty and respect and care and forgiveness and fun and intimacy. They are the relationships where we feel cared for and understood, and they're therefore very important. Social networks normally for most people are about 25 people, and of the 25, 3 to 6 will be very close friends who would be available on a daily basis to provide companionship, advice, and help with a range of tasks. The pandemic has cut us off from family and friends, and we have lost a lot of those supportive relationships. And when we lose that family contact and company, we put ourselves at risk of isolation. And isolation, as you probably know, takes away our security and makes us feel vulnerable. And at winter time and night time and in times of emergency are the most likely times that we will feel the risk of isolation. And what we need if we are isolated is someone to turn to and someone to share happiness or sadness or loss or worry with. So if you are feeling isolated, if you are listening to us now and you're feeling isolated, check the network you had already prior to March, whether it was at training or at the church or at the shop or the day centre or any other activity group, and plan to make one contact a day at a time when you have time. Because one good contact with someone who cares and someone who will listen will provide the antidote to isolation. And if you have time, and it's time to be thinking of Christmas at this stage, maybe plan to write a letter or a card or send a little parcel to friends and relations who won't be home this Christmas. And also it's worth checking if you are giving enough attention to your personal relationships. If you are paying attention, you will be alert and present and listening and enjoying quality time together. And just a tip on that, you might need to dump the phone sometimes, as even the presence of the phone is detrimental to the quality of our attention and our ability to listen. And if any conflict has arisen, the changes brought about by working from home and people spending more time together and sharing workspace can and does cause tensions. So you might need to set aside some time to talk and listen. Help is there if you need it. It might be a call to the Gardaí or to Clarecare or to Clarehaven Services. They have recently moved into the village, and their number is displayed close by to the Maxall station. It is difficult to make new friends now. The students are not in college. Some people have to isolate. But people have found positives and benefits by using social media, Skype, Facebook, WhatsApp, Snapchat and Instagram. And they all offer new ways of keeping in contact. However, just be aware that likes and contacts are not the same as the close friends you are missing out on and who would usually be available to you on a daily basis. So this evening I want to say to you, keep in contact. If someone offers contact, accept it. If you need help, ask for it. See asking for help as a strength. There may be another way of looking at something that you are finding difficult. And if you want to make a note of the task that I want you to do, don't wait to call someone. Plan to do it now. The other thing that gives us, or the third area that gives us assistance to our self-care and mental health are the activities that we do, the structure and the routine that we get from work and from our hobbies. And routine is like our organised plan for the day. We follow similar patterns daily, and it is important to keep to the routine. Even if you work from home, try and keep to the same hours. And the best way to divide it up, if you can, is 8 hours work, 8 hours sleep, and 8 hours to yourself, your family, and other activities. So it's easy to remember the 3 8s. If you find, as I have, you're staying up late, maybe try and stick to regular bedtime and getting up time. And keep to work times, whether you're at the workplace or whether you're working from home, to ensure that you have the other hours for your relaxation and your hobbies and your reading. And try not to plan too much for one day, because that can be overwhelming. Some people like to make big long lists and plans, But that can be very disheartening if you don't get to complete the tasks in the day. So if you're feeling overwhelmed in any way, my advice would be to list 3 things only that you want to achieve each day. If you are not working, you should also plan a regular routine so that you can start the day with a breakfast or a coffee or a walk, and maybe include in the day 1 thing for you and 1 thing that you can do for someone else. And there are days that you might not be in the mood for anything, but do not let your mood control your behavior. If you have an action planned and you do it, it can change your mood. So think, can you learn something new? Can you pick up an old hobby or an interest? Plan ahead if you cannot do it now, as action and thinking or planning the action are controlled by the same part of the brain. So planning to do something in the future can be just as beneficial, even if you can't do it now. So my task in terms of that area of self-care that you might make a note of is to think of 1 activity or 1 hobby that you can plan or do. The next area of self-care that I will touch briefly on is eating well. So the benefits of healthy eating are well documented, and combined with exercise contribute hugely to our well-being and our mood. One of the benefits again of having time is it gives the opportunity for more home cooking and more baking and more trying out new foods. We also need maybe to check if we have developed poor habits since March. If working from home, and we might find we are snacking more during the day or more snacking at night. And I know I've heard people anecdotally talking about the COVID-19 kilo or the COVID-19 stone. I suppose one of the things that we revert to in difficult times is comfort food. Alcohol or smoking do have benefits in terms of relaxing and unwinding, but they are short-term coping mechanisms and not good for health long-term. With pubs closed, there has been an increase in drinking at home, which again sometimes can be beneficial and sometimes badly needed. But be careful that excess can cause difficulties. And if that is the case in your house, maybe look for help. Our young people in particular have regularly hit the headlines for bad behaviour around house parties and street drinking. Young people are our future, and the vast majority are compliant with the regulations, which has turned their lives upside down. So your task, if you want to make note of it, in terms of eating and drinking, might be just to keep a check for the next week of how you're doing. And the final area I want to cover is minding your mood or managing our thoughts. How we cope with COVID-19 pandemic will by and large mirror how we cope with life generally. We always live in uncertain times. 100 years ago, Irish people were living in the most violent years in our history. And what do we remember and celebrate? We celebrate the bravery and the loyalty of our young people. 2020 will be remembered for taking the lives of people vulnerable by age, by underlying illness. How will 2020 be remembered in 100 years? And finally, I just want to talk about resilience. Resilience is our ability to adapt and persevere when faced with adversity and challenges in life. It's what helps us to deal with the past, to cope with the present, and to plan for the future. It helps us deal with the ups and downs, the joys and the sorrows, the positives and the negatives. It helps us to move forward and to cope with a good day or a bad day. Resilience is what gives us perspective and allows us to put things into perspective. We are better able to bounce back from life events, whether that's fear of COVID-19, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a relationship, or being out of work. Resilience gives us the confidence to deal with these life events and to survive tough times. And hopefully soon we'll open up our world so that we can try new experiences. How often have you heard the saying, he or she is back to himself or back to herself? And it's often that we notice that a person is back to themselves after a difficult time. It can take time, and this is a difficult time and an uncertain time, and we don't know how long it will go on for. We all have different levels of resilience, and we can increase it. And we might be able to deal with some things better than others. And one of the ways that we can build resilience is how we tune into others, how we understand others and their behavior. And it's important for resilience that we have a sense of humor, and that sometimes we are able not to take it too serious. And it's important that we have interests and purposes, and that we are working towards a goal, and then when we reach it, that we have a sense of achievement. So when I mentioned that you would put 3 things in the plan for the day, and you achieve those at the end of the day, you have worked towards a goal, and then you can acknowledge that the achievement when you complete it. Resilience helps, what can also help obviously is being optimistic. And optimistic underpins resilience. If you're optimistic at this stage, your glass will be half full with the possibility of new vaccines, with the news that there's a 75% decrease in deaths in this lockdown, that hospitals are better able to cope, and that at some stage travel will be possible with testing. What also helps resilience is realistic thinking, that how we think will determine how we cope. Mick Wallace often quotes Henry Ford. If you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. If you think you can manage, you will believe that you will be okay. And even if you are not okay, you will believe that you are able to manage. On a normal day, we have about 70,000 thoughts going through our head, both positive and negative. Now that's a lot, but the good news is that 95% of those thoughts occur every day or are repeated every day. So when we're thinking it's time to get up or time to go to bed or we feel hungry or it's time to go for a walk, they are thoughts that are continually repeated. We have a tendency to negative thoughts, and it's important to look for the best balance. And the best balance is always 3 positive to 1 negative. Mindfulness is tuning in to what you are doing when you are doing it. When you come out of the present, your subconscious mind takes over and your body can get crippled by stress. Worry causes stress and drains your energy. Worrying about things we cannot change causes stress, but concentrating on the present moment stops us running ahead of ourselves. When you are present in the moment, your body is relaxed. You are in the moment and you can breathe. Take a moment now to focus on your breath. It is an exercise you can do anytime you feel overwhelmed. Take 3 deep breaths. So, to conclude, I have looked at how keeping active, keeping in contact, hobbies and activities, eating well, and minding your mood and stress level benefits our self-care and well-being. Control what you can is the dream. We know what helps. Wash our hands, wear the mask, cough and sneeze etiquette. We have control and ownership of the problem and the solution. I will do what I can to keep safe and well. Do not focus on what we cannot control, because it's a nightmare if you do. Focus on what you have and not what you are missing, and do one thing at least every day to keep you well. Stay safe, and thank you for your attention.
That's great. Thank you very much, James, and so nicely put. Wonderful points there for young and old across our community to take on board for their care and well-being as we continue with our COVID, living with COVID. So you mentioned there as well, I suppose, the importance of activity in sports, and another, I suppose, COVID person, he's a role in COVID in Clare Anthony Daly famously once said, we love our traditional music and we love our hurling as well, and certainly we wish our Clare hurlers great at the weekend, but we're going to come back to another bit of music now, I think, a few more tunes from our Kilfenora musicians, and we'll hand you over if you're ready. Yeah, great, thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. And indeed, James gave us plenty food for thought there. We're delighted to be here, to be part of this, because the opportunities we have for playing have been taken away from us, and so seldom do we can get together now and play a tune that it's always great to do that. Let me briefly, before we continue, let me introduce you to the people that are here. We have Sinead Higney on fiddle, who I believe lives fairly close by now. Pat Lynch is from Clogher, Kilfenora. We have Siobhan O'Donoghue, who currently resides, I think, is it Ina, Siobhan? My name is Mike Butler, I live up the road, and the man that put it all together, he's a parishioner here, and he needs no introduction at all. He's the leader of the Kilfenora Ceili Band, which is synonymous with traditional music, and of course I'm talking about John Lynch. John, thank you so much for putting this together, and it's a pleasure for us to be here and be part of it. Before James spoke, we played 3 jigs. There were Paddy's Return, the Old Kilfenora jig, and the chorus jig. We'll now play 3 reels. I think we might play maybe 2 selections if we have time. Have we time? We have. Okay, so we're going to play 3 reels this time. The first one is called The Mountain Road, The Road to Rio, and Charlie Mulvehels. Thank you. you. Now we're going to finish off with 3 polkas. First one is Liston-Varna, second one is the Lakes of Sligo, and the third one is I'll Tell Me Ma.
That's our session for this evening. I want to thank so much the Kilfenora musicians, James, fantastic speech, Marie, everyone else that has helped organize. I want to do a special call out for Jared Ward, who really pushed that we do these sessions. To mention, this is the first one we have tonight. We will have a recording of it up on YouTube shortly. We'll have that advertised on social media. So for those who didn't get a chance to catch it live, don't worry, there's a refund. We have that available. Next week, we're going to have some special guests from the GAA, and we'll have that announced in the next day. Same time, same place here from Clarecastle Parish at 7 p.m. on Thursday. Thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe, be well. Thank you.